Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is my colleague, Forbes staff writer, Will Yakowicz. Will, thanks for coming on again.
Thanks for having me, Brittany. Good to see you.
Good to see you. And you cover vices for Forbes and compiled a list of some of the movers and shakers in the cannabis industry for 2023. But first, set the scene for us. Walk us over the past 2 years. What has been happening in the cannabis industry? From your reporting, it sounds like, it's been a bit of a bumpy ride.
Yeah, it has been a bumpy ride. So 2 years ago, it really did seem like federal legalization was on the horizon. It really felt any day, maybe in 2020, maybe 2021, and then by the end of 2022, the industry realized that was not going to happen, that it wasn't going to happen as quickly as they had hoped and that they had imagined. But so 2 years ago, a couple things happened. There were a couple bills filed in, some in the House, some in the Senate. And the most promising one was the majority leader, Chuck Schumer, a Democrat from New York, filed a bill to legalize cannabis. It would end the federal prohibition and take it off Schedule 1, which is the designation it's under now. And they didn't bring it to a vote. And then there was another bill that would have eased some banking concerns called the Safe Banking Act, and that wasn't voted upon. So at the end of this year, what we saw was cannabis stocks, the prices cratered, some as much as 70% or more. And then there were other economic pressures, like being that it's still illegal. Taxes are punitive because the federal government taxes the industry as it is designated, which is a federally illegal drug. So they tax them as drug traffickers. And not to get too wonky here, but 280E is the tax code, and it's a killer for the industry. It can really wipe out any profits that a company may have. So where we are this year is like the hype is much more muted. We saw the first drop in the number of jobs in the industry in since the legal industry's been recorded. So that was a big deal, and now it's kind of we're what we're seeing, the landscape is companies that have had tight balance sheets and that have not been spending too much or taking on too much debt are doing well. The demand is still high, and now we're just dropped down to normal levels. But so any company that's out there that's really focused on their balance sheet is doing well.
Will, I'm really interested to hear how these companies are adapting. From what you're describing, it sounds like they're in a bit of a holding pattern. They've been in a bit of limbo since 2020, and you called what's coming an inevitable green rush. So, what are these companies and these leaders that are on your list doing?
So the companies that are strong and are in good shape, it's business as usual. Because what you do have to understand is most of the people in the industry aren't, Johnny come latelys. They've been in it, what the industry refers to as legacy entrepreneurs. It's people who were working in the illicit market before there were any kind of state licenses, any kind of state level regulation. So the companies are just like, look, we've done this before. We've gone through periods of, like winter, so to speak, where times are lean and things are uncertain. So these companies are just trying to, keep innovating, keep product on the shelves and go forward. And it eventually, when federal legalization does come, take advantage of it.
Let's dive a little deeper into those innovations. You compiled a list of the 42 entrepreneurs and leaders in the cannabis industry. Tell us a little bit about the list.
So this year is the second time we've done this list. It's an annual tradition at this point. But yeah, me and Isabel Lord, my colleague, and then my editor, Michael Solomon, for the last few months, we've been getting nominations. We've been doing our own research, collecting names, and then going through financial documents, interviewing these people and talking to investors, and then going through this big list. We have a huge number of people, like over 100 names, and then we whittle it down to 42, which is obviously hard and heartbreaking. But no, then the end product is a really tight list of people who are doing great things in the industry. So the entrepreneurs highlighted on our list are from all parts of the industry. When concerning flower and farmers, One of the highlights is Ridgeline Farms. It's founded by a man named Jason Gelman. He's a longtime cultivator. He grew up growing cannabis in Humboldt County, California, running from helicopters. Then he got licensed, and now he grows some of the most sought after strains in the industry. And, it's craft, it's sun grown, it's small batch. And Jason just inked an exciting deal with Cookies, and he'll be selling his proprietary strain through their dispensaries this year. Then on the software side, it runs the gamut. We have a company called FlowHub. They sell software to run a dispensary's POS and compliance systems. We have companies like Jane, which allow customers to order cannabis online for either pickup or delivery. And then we have other companies like Imperial, which is a logistics company, speaking to the hardships some dispensaries and cannabis companies have. There are about 800 banks across the US that serve cannabis companies. Like pretty much every company in the industry has a bank account. However, there are certain things that are difficult. And, most dispensaries, you have to deal with cash. You have to accept cash because you can't use credit cards. And there are some solutions for debit cards, but the majority of sales are in cash. This means these dispensaries, many of them are mom and pop shops, have huge amounts of cash to deal with. So what Imperial does is they help companies get bank accounts and manage those relationships, but they also transport physical cash from a business to usually the Federal Reserve.
One of the standouts to me on your list was Al Harrington, who was in the NBA for 16 years, and now he's leading the charge in the cannabis industry. So can you talk about that, crossover between athlete to entrepreneur?
Yeah, so Al Harrington is a great example. He started a company called Viola, which he named after his grandmother, who has sadly passed away, but she was the inspiration to start his company. She had a bunch of health issues, and one of them was glaucoma, and one day her eyes were killing her, and he got weed for her. She toked up, she felt better, and as he was going into retirement from the NBA, he was looking for a new business venture, so he started this company. And yeah, they started off like with one grow in Detroit. Now they're almost in 10 states. They also have licensing deals across other states where they don't have a physical presence, cultivation wise. So one of Viola's goals, one of Al Harrington's goals, is to help the industry increase the number of Black and brown entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs, people of color in the industry. So cannabis largely is only 2% of business owners in cannabis are Black and brown people. So what Al is doing, he has a couple initiatives, and one of them is to, he has this big audacious goal to make 100 Black millionaires in the industry. So he's created an incubator and is looking for strong entrepreneurs that he will help fund and help mentor. And he has a couple already in the roster that are doing pretty well. And then, other people on the list, Roland Connor, he has one of the, I think there are like 5 or 6 licenses in the New York market. New York just legalized in 2021. And this year they just started rolling out dispensaries. And they really don't have a lot, but Roland Connor he has a fantastic story. He grew up in Queens in the housing projects, got arrested for marijuana many times, and now he opened a dispensary in the Village in Manhattan, and he is probably like the greatest example of what New York is trying to do. New York is dedicating its first licenses to people who are justice involved. That's the phrase New York is using. So anybody who's gotten arrested for marijuana in the past. And so that's Roland's story. And he opened actually the second dispensary, but the first justice involved person to operate a dispensary in the New York market.
Will, that really brings up an interesting point. How many people in the cannabis industry were arrested for marijuana back in the day, and now they kind of flipped that on their head? Is that a big number?
So it's a good question, because certain states, what New York is doing is extremely unique. Most states from the get-go ban anyone who had a felony, even if it was for selling marijuana, from the industry. So when California, Colorado, all these states started licensing businesses, they were saying if you have a criminal record, you're not getting in, which is very similar to other vice industries like gambling. Gambling, you have to, if you want to be a gaming operator, if you want a gaming license, you have to go through background checks, you have to get fingerprinted, and if you have any kind of criminal history, you won't be able to participate. That is how the cannabis industry played out for the first bunch of years in most states. And then New York, they've had a really kind of sleepy and small medical market. It's all controlled by, publicly traded companies. And what New York wanted to do for its adult use market was kind of flip the industry on its head and say, like, this is a problem. If the war on drugs had racist tendencies, Black people are 4% more likely to get arrested for marijuana than white people. And white people and Black and brown people use marijuana at the same rates, essentially. So the laws, the war on pot has had, it's had racist roots from the beginning, but it also played out with these huge racial disparities. So New York decided, California didn't take it, Colorado didn't take it. How can we help New Yorkers who have been tied up in this racist war on drugs to help flip the paradigm? So they decided that they would reserve the first batch of hundreds of licenses to people who've been quote unquote justice involved. So there's decent representation, but it's not great. And then when you break down ownership racially, it's a largely white industry. So, but you will talk to people like, one person who was on the list last year, who has this great business, Huckleberry Hill Farms. His name is Johnny. He was arrested, served 8 years. Like there are tons of stories, especially on the cultivation side. You don't just wake up one day and decide you want to grow pot and you're going to do it legally. Like most of, this plant's been illegal for decades, right? So most of the people who are really good at cultivation, like anything, it takes time, to master a craft. A lot of people on the cultivation side had run-ins with the law. But yeah, New York is doing something very unique. And it's hard too, because kind of meshing these two goals with like filling a market's needs. Right now, New York has a humongous issue with unlicensed businesses. So if you didn't know anything about the industry or about the legal status and went to New York, there's weed shops everywhere. But the problem is they're unlicensed. And what the state is trying to do is open the legal industry to kind of shut down this unlicensed industry, but it's been difficult. So kind of threading the needle with these two goals, like legalizing marijuana and having enough access to meet the demand. New York is going to be the second largest market. If there's enough stores open, legal sales could hit like 4 to 5 billion in a couple of years. So yeah, they're trying to thread this needle. It's like this, fill demand in this capitalist framework, which obviously is our economy, and then kind of achieve these social justice and social equity goals.
I do want to talk about someone on the list who, as of right now, might be arguably the biggest name internationally, and that's WNBA superstar Brittany Griner, who was detained in Russia last year over a cannabis charge there. So can you tell us why she made the list this year?
So for people who don't know, Brittany is a basketball star. She's really accomplished center in the WNBA. And she got arrested in Moscow. She was playing off season, which she's done for years, in Russia. And when she got off the plane, she got stopped and they found cannabis vaporizers in her bag. And she, long said that it was a mistake. She didn't, she has a medical card. She uses it medically, but she didn't mean to bring it to Russia. So they arrested her and she, pled guilty. She went to a penal colony and she was there for 10 months. It was a really harrowing experience. But what it did was put, kind of the hypocrisy of the United States drug laws and what we're putting people in jail still to this day. It's illegal federally. People are still getting caught up because of these laws. So really why Brittany's on the list is because of her influence and kind of how she put a mirror to the United States and how we deal with marijuana to this day at a federal level. So the Biden administration referred to her arrest and detention in Russia as wrongful. So really what Brittany did was she put a mirror up, like just her situation, put a mirror up for the US to reflect on how we still treat marijuana and people who use the drug or are in the industry to this day.
Do you see her situation changing any laws in the United States or changing anything in the next year in the cannabis industry?
So that's the $26 billion question, which happens to be how much cannabis was sold last year. But right now, the Biden administration has asked the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services to review marijuana's scheduling. So right now it's in the same schedule as LSD and drugs like heroin, which like on the face, I think it's pretty safe to say, any educated person who knows the differences between these drugs can say that's ridiculous, right? Marijuana, especially compared to other legal substances like alcohol and tobacco. So anyway, the point is that Biden has asked HHS to review the scheduling, and they will have a decision out. They said they wanted a decision out based on science and facts and all that, but they wanted to do it very quickly. So the secretary has said multiple times that we're going to look at the science, but it also is like, has the country's views and relationships with marijuana changed since the 1990s? And any observer can say, yes, it very much has. Right now, we're almost at 40 states that have some type of legalization. More than half Americans live in a state that regulate marijuana in some way for legal sales. So, there is hope on the horizon, but with the federal government, it moves slow, and industry, as always, and entrepreneurs move much faster.
Will, I'm really interested to know, what do you think the future is here? You covered this list in 2022 and 2023. First, I want you to say the biggest differences you saw, and where do you think we're going? What do you think we should keep our eyes out for heading from 2023 to 2024?
That's a good question. So, the evolution, like these companies are getting stronger. Another standout on the list is Nancy Whiteman. She started one of the first edibles brands in America, like that was licensed. She started it in 2014 in Denver. And a lot of those companies that started 2014, the first year adult use sales launched in Colorado, are just not around. So what she built is one of the country's largest edibles companies. And she sold the right for this Canadian company to acquire, when it's federally legal, her company. And she sold it for like $350 million. She is right now like let me just do that one part. So she sold the right for a Canadian company to acquire her company once it's federally legal. She sold it for $350 million. She sold this option to buy. So right now she is one of the most successful people in the industry, like period, like that she's created humongous value. So what we are seeing is these companies, we're kind of seeing a bloodbath on anybody who isn't have a tight balance sheet. But then we're also seeing success, like we're seeing the cream rising to the top. And years down the line, who knows? It's a crystal ball situation. But I do think we are going to see like waves of consolidation. We've already been seeing that, really every year. Companies start merging, or bigger companies acquire smaller companies that have really been successful. So I think we're going to continue to see that. And then we're going to see bigger players get in. Alcohol and tobacco companies have already made billions of dollars in investment, and they're going to continue to do that. And then this is really just like, no one knows how the federal government will regulate it if they decide to do so. But, alcohol has a two-tiered system, meaning like you can make it, but you can't sell it directly to customers. And there's a distribution line right there between. So people do assume that legalization and regulation of marijuana at the federal level might look a lot like alcohol or tobacco. So we will see. But, like everything, it really comes down to money and how much tax revenue the federal government can squeeze out of the industry.
And if you can boil down 2023's cannabis list to one common theme, what would that be?
That's a tough one, but I think innovation is really kind of the common theme. There are companies, companies live and die off innovation, right? Like you can't sit on your hands. You have to constantly be following consumer trends and pivoting or dealing with new regulations. Like, especially when a state first starts, they just don't know how to regulate. This has forever been, not forever, but for the past 80 years, cannabis has largely been illegal across the US. So down to packaging, down to driving, DUIs, and like how do you tell if someone is high? It's a difficult thing. It's not like alcohol where they can take a breathalyzer and it's like, well, you're over the limit, so you're now under arrest. So there's just so many different ways that legalization affects society, right? So how do you make sure these products don't get in the hands of children, right? Like the common thinking is when you regulate and legalize something, bring it out into the sunlight, you can prevent sales. Like, you have to show your ID when you buy alcohol or cigarettes or weed at a retail shop, right? But in the illicit market, that structure doesn't exist. But then there are new different problems that arise. Banking obviously is an issue, even though it's always been an issue for the industry. But like once states are taking tax revenue from marijuana companies, and obviously the federal government does that too, like how do you deal with that? And how do you deal with these businesses that are getting taxed as a legal entity at the state level and then an illegal entity at the federal level? So it really comes down to innovation, and companies have to adapt to changing customer demands, changing economic climate. I mean, just over the 2 years, we saw a bust and a boom and a bust and a boom, so, and then changing regulations or like the status quo on the federal level. Marijuana is still illegal, and it's very difficult for companies to deal with.
Obviously, it's a fast changing industry. I'm excited to keep our eye on it throughout the next year. Will Yakowicz, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Brittany. Appreciate it.